Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I know before it was hard to hear. Can you hear me better now? Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me and thank you for holding this event. As a mayor of Glendale, I'm extremely proud to be a city that hosts this important monument. And I'm very pleased to know that you gather here. And I understand you haven't gathered here for a few years, but that you normally gather here, and I think in the future will continue to gather here to remember the tens of thousands, actually the hundreds of thousands of women and girls who were forced into sexual slavery by the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. Many Korean women, of course, but many we know from all over Asian countries like Taiwan, China, Philippines, Indonesia, and elsewhere. They are all our grandmothers, they're all our mothers, they're all our daughters. I have two daughters, and I can't begin to think about the horrors of what parents experience when their daughters were ripped away from them. So it's hard to understand in our time. I know the presence of this monument, as the senator said, has been controversial in the past, and it continues to spark controversy. It really shouldn't. We know the history is crystal clear, that there was a systematic, I should say, program of tricking, or in many cases forcibly abducting women and girls into bondage to provide sex to the Japanese troops. Many were brutalized and raped, and the scars are not just physical, of course, but emotional because of the stigma that prevented the survivors for many, many years from talking about their experience. This is a history we should not hesitate to talk about. We need to talk about it. We need to educate our children about it. And I think in American schools, we don't do that very well. Because I, for one, did not know about this history probably until I reached adulthood. There were many atrocities in World War II, as we know. In all wars, wars by their nature are government orchestrated violence. Systematic rape is a key feature of war throughout history, but that doesn't make this atrocity any less horrific or unacceptable. We need to remember this chapter, just as we need to remember all the other horrific events that affect this community in particular, the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, and for other communities, the massacre of the Hutus in Rwanda, ethnic cleansing in the former Yugoslavia. There's a very long list representing man's inhumanity to man. And we also, and some people are very uncomfortable with this, but we also have to point a finger at ourselves. And we need to remember our own culpability in the genocide of the Native Americans and in the slavery of Africans and their descendants. If we can't point a finger at ourselves, how can we point a finger at anybody else? Sadly, these types of things that we're describing continue to this day. But I think there's something changing. I hope these things are more likely to trigger revulsion, less accepted. There are more consequences for the perpetrators, and I think that's what our job is to come here, to show up, to talk about this history, and hopefully, over time, these kinds of atrocities will be less and less frequent, and ideally, no longer part of the human experience. So I want to thank you again for your commitment, and I want to acknowledge the memory of these women and girls who suffered so terribly.